Hello, it's Kevin Lawrence here, and I'm super excited to be here with Clemens and Jina from Cloré, a company they'll tell you about in just a second. A number of members of our team have had the great enjoyment of working with them on their organization, and they're a brother and sister duo. That's Jina and Clemens, um, and they've learned a lot growing up in their family business and the community through their father Young. And initially, they grew up as their father operated a convenience store, and then as they turned into their teen years, he led a business called Cloré, which is a black beauty supply company based in Canada. And recently, when it came time to transfer the business to the siblings to run instead of the father, they went, I think we might need a bit of help with this one. Dad handing over the reins and then them taking on the responsibility. So they started working with one of our advisors, Tim Skocking, who is based in Whistler, BC. And from what they say, and we recently put together a case study on their experience of this, which you can read in the links below this. They said it was a very transformative, and now they're proudly leading Cloré to the next step and the next level. And Jina as the CEO and Clemens as the president, which is, we're just chatting before this, exciting to see in a family business when the next generation can take over the reins and put their stamp on the business and take it to the next level. So I really want to thank both of you for being here today and be able to share your story and for others so people can learn, whether it's from family business generally or succession or just the growth of a very niche business. So thank you both for being here today.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Tim,
you
for having us and giving us this opportunity. Super excited.
Yes,
Yeah, me too. And the first thing I'll say is we just met 15 minutes ago.
Mhm.
So they've worked with like 4 of the members of our team, like Tim on the strategy side, Curtis on financial, Brett's helped with some org and HR stuff, and Kristen with some assessing of key leaders that they've hired. So and this is for me, from my perspective, it's a client that hasn't been something that I've led, which makes it even more exciting because they get to see the great work that my team is doing with somebody else. So it's very gratifying for me as well. So, but before we, can you just tell me a bit about Cloré? It's a fascinating, very, very niche business. Tell me a little bit more about the business before we jump into your story.
So, as you mentioned, we own a black beauty supply, and it was a surprise to us as well to find out that behind the scenes of the black beauty industry, there are a lot of Korean manufacturers, and that's how they started becoming retailers in the business. And so at a young age of about 13, 14, we got exposed to it. Our uncle in the US, he owned a store and partnered with our father and another uncle. And we started our first black beauty supply in 2000.
Awesome. And where was that first store?
Keelan Shepherd. That's
Yeah,
what
and
it
where
was
is
known
that?
as, the store at Keelan Shepherd.
Okay, and where is that city-wise? Where is that? Or is
Oh,
Taylor
in
Shepherd
Toronto, Ontario.
in Toronto? Okay, so Toronto on the east coast of Canada for those that aren't in Canada.
Yes.
That is awesome. And give a sense of, and where is the business at today?
Today, we
How many
have
how many
10 locations. All but one is in Ontario. So we have our first one in Edmonton, Alberta, that we opened last year.
Ah, awesome. Actually, I was just in Edmonton this week. Okay,
Oh,
great.
nice.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So that gives kind of context of it. So tell, what was it like growing up in a family business? I'm sure, I mean, especially when you started with the convenience store through to this business. Yeah, that must have been interesting.
Yeah, it was I'd say from our perspective almost like normal because that's all we've ever known. Our dad's always been an art, even before the convenience store. He's had his own businesses before that, and so it was funny because it's like, oh, if you want to spend more time with dad, you gotta go to work. I'm like 10 years old at his convenience store, playing and like learning how to run the registers and going with him to the wholesale business, and like we just mentioned before this, kind of learning through osmosis. I'm just there with him all the time. So it was I would define it almost as normal.
Mm.
Yeah. And again, like if you want to spend time with dad, it's like you got to go to work.
You always wonder when you go into, I was in a restaurant the other day and there's the kids sitting beside them doing their homework or something in the restaurant at one of the tables while mom and dad are running the restaurant. And it's sort of almost, to put it in our mind, is a picture kind of like that, but in a convenience store.
We got paid to do errands with
Oh,
candy. Mhm.
really?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
5 cents foot, like those little red foot candies. Yeah, you do
Yep.
an errand and then you get a candy.
That's good. Which and we were talking about another thing earlier today, but it's like, and then that's like, and that candy might have cost 5 cents, but then there's margin in it, so it's actually costing less. It's better than paying cash. That's that
Exactly.
entrepreneurial mind, and obviously sugar and kids kind of sometimes that's a fairly easy sell. That's good. Cool.
Mhm.
So you did all that, and then the Black Beauty business started to go, and for you, and you started to, as you were involved in the business, what was your roles in the business before you started to transition into the president and CEO roles today? What were you doing before that, or what kind of things had you done along the way?
Oh, we had to start from the bottom. We were
Really?
cleaning and doing inventory stocking, pricing.
Okay.
It was actually a game, like who can price the on the center the fastest,
Oh, because did you have the old
The manual
Yes,
the
price
old
gun.
yeah,
manual
yeah,
pricers? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And the
I got
old
really
cash
fast and good at
registers,
that. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
can type it in the fastest. But that's where we started. And personally, I really enjoyed the customer service aspect. I
Mm,
have my personal passion in hair. And so, finding the right colors, finding the perfect hairstyle
mm.
for someone, that was really rewarding during like the customer service process.
Yeah, Gina
Awesome.
really liked the beauty side of things. So she had that personal kind of interest and passion. And
Mm,
and for me, I'm not so into hair and beauty and so much personally. But yeah, like for me, I think I was like the cashier for the first like 10 years probably.
mm,
And just again, our father being an immigrant, not comfortable with the language, he always told me like he felt very confident in me being there, like being a native English speaker and being able to communicate with the
mm.
customers and trusted me with like the cash and the till and all of that. So did a lot of spent a lot of time there, and then from there going to like opening and closing the store and operating the store, doing inventory and all of that. I wasn't so big on the customer service side of things, but pretty much did everything else.
And then after I graduated university, my dad let me design my first store because I graduated from interior design.
Mm.
And so I got to design my first store. And then that naturally
Look
put
at the
me in.
smile on your face. You enjoyed that, hey? I can
Yes, I
see.
did.
Loves it.
Yeah,
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 I do. And I still do. I still love doing
yeah.
it. And then he gave me the reins for all the marketing stuff in our stores. So I was able to do marketing, get my hands in, and that was pretty much the majority of my role until I became the vice president. And even as the vice president, I did a lot of marketing. And then now
Yep.
we finally have someone on board that's taking on the reins.
Mm. Oh, the marketing reins, yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Awesome.
Just hired a director of marketing, so he's doing great.
Great. That's the next level. So how did it go from your roles as you were growing up in the business to then, that from your father handing over the reins, and that's that big transition. And that's something that can be incredibly challenging for a lot of different reasons. So how did that all happen? How did that transition happen, and what made it work in your mind?
Mm. I say it was definitely a messy transition getting there from customer service and cashier to running marketing, and I was doing like IT, no IT background, but I was interested in it. So it's like, oh, from old cashier, like manual cash registers, to having a POS system and a computer with internet. Like I'm kind of dating myself, all of that, it was like new, and going up from there and figuring out then, we are a retail business, so who's running the retail operation side of things, the purchasing, the warehousing. There's a lot of, as we're growing, a lot of components that were, being created within the organization, and figuring out who's going to do what between me, Gina, and then my dad as well. I'd say it was definitely a messy transition. And the point of the beginning point of like clarity, I would say, is yeah, when we got Tim in as our coach, and he really brought in his external expertise, and we got exposed to this is what it's like in other businesses, other family businesses, um, learning a lot from him and his experience, and him kind of showing us what is possible, and then us kind of being able to utilize that structure and fit things within there on what works best, and then customizing that to our own individual personal interests and what we're good at and what we enjoy doing.
Honestly,
So what?
Young said that he did not want to leave work until he couldn't walk anymore. And so in our minds,
That's typical. That's
yeah,
typical. Like you
yeah,
take them out of the business in a stretcher or a wooden box. Yeah.
yeah. And until we started talking about outside of Cloré, like what do we want our business to look like beyond just what we're doing now? That's when Young shared his vision of our family growing with other businesses outside of Cloré, and that became, I think, the starting point of him thinking outside the box, us being able to think bigger outside of ourselves and what we're doing now. And it went from, within 6 months, it went from Young saying, you know, I'll work another 5 years, to, okay, next month I'll go as chairman. You guys can take over. Like within
Like
6 months.
that sounds almost unbelievable. Like
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
like what? So how did that happen?
I
That's awesome. But
I
what
did ask.
changed?
I did ask what changed his mind, and he said after seeing how our strategy meetings are going, hearing about like how we're going to take the next steps, and him seeing Clemens and I taking the effort in getting to know each other, working together, he felt confident. Like, I don't need to be the middleman anymore.
Yeah, there was definitely that, tension and ego between Gina and I, and kind of fighting for whose opinion is right, and oh, I think this is better, or I think that is better. But seeing us kind of work more collaboratively and as a team, and seeing, oh, there's I don't want to say harmony, but there's alignment. Maybe not always agreement, but there's alignment.
Yep.
So him seeing that happen, I guess in that short amount of time, gave him the confidence to be able to step back and play golf every day now, right?
That is, and he stayed out.
Yes, he's been enjoying that, and I mean, obviously we keep him posted, and he still likes to come into the office and be around people, but it's to a point I think he's definitely has comfort in knowing that everything's taken care of.
Well, that's a very inspiring story for a lot of people, like second generation family business, because that's what people want, but to get there can be really difficult. So just to play that back is, because he could see that you were aligning and figuring stuff out and having what sounds like good, like he had confidence in the way you were working together and what you were going to do with the business. That makes sense. And what were the things specifically that helped you two? And you mentioned, Tim shared some things, but what was it that got the two of you working so well together and aligned? What were the things that helped that?
I'll say one is recognizing ego. That was a big one. So before it was again with the sibling relationship, not realizing that there was ego involved, and then once we were exposed to that, hey, like we think this is, our egos kind of getting in the way of us being able to really be open-minded and to listen to each other. I feel like, because of our ego, when the other one had an idea, it'd be like, no, my idea is better. But now it's like, oh, hey, what do you like about that idea? What's the good in that? Being more open-minded and being more curious. So instead of just saying what we think, sharing our opinions and advice, how can we lead with curious questions to understand the other better, to really get to the essence of what they're saying? And maybe it's not the how, maybe it's the what. Where can we kind of find alignment again? We don't have to agree on exactly how it's going to be done, but we're aligned on, okay, this is the end goal though.
Yeah, the how gets really dicey, especially for people that are driven in leadership roles, because there's lots of ways to get there. But alignment around what generally is a little bit easier. But for whatever reason, we tend to degrade into how conversations, and those are really difficult to align.
Yeah.
And the biggest learning lesson throughout all of this was keeping each other accountable. Our dad was just a giver. He was a yes man. Do whatever you want. He really put all his trust in us. What we didn't learn was how to keep each other accountable. And Tim brought that in. And the hardest part was not only to identify like what we need to keep accountable, but how do we come across so that we don't get defensive? how do we say it in a way so that it's towards growth? And so
Yeah.
we learned a lot from Tim when it came to accountability. Even keeping him accountable. Tim kept our dad accountable.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
amazing to see because we couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's common in those family dynamics where
Yeah.
sometimes an outsider can do things that the family can't. So
Yeah.
can you give an example? And that's a great, it sounds like um a lot of like the emotional intelligence of how you communicate and how you work together was a big
Yes.
part of it. Um, can you give an example of how would you hold Clemens accountable, but in a way that's positive versus maybe what the old way was? If he is,
So the
or
old
maybe
way
Clemens could
was
probably tell us that. Yeah.
the old way was, based on my opinion, I don't think you did this, or why did you do this? And right away the defenses would go up. But
Yep.
the new way is coming in with curiosity. What did you do for X, Y, and Z? Or, what was the thought process behind it? Because maybe there's something that I didn't understand, so that when he explains it to me, it's no longer an assumption, or he did exactly what he was asked to do and I just didn't realize. So there was a lot of opportunity to be clear about our intentions, and that helped frame the conversation so that we were more willing to be open-minded and listen to each other.
That's
Yeah.
really good communication you're talking about there. That's really good, healthy, clean adult communication. That's awesome.
Yes.
Clemens,
Yes.
go ahead. You want? Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
great.
would say like to add to that, two things. One is like having ongoing conversations. So we have like a weekly one-on-one between
Yep.
the two of us. So that ongoing open safe space to talk to each other about things like that. And the other thing that we learned, I think that was super helpful, is who, what, when, like knowing, who's going to do what by when. The when I think was really
Yeah.
important, but defining that and kind of writing that down versus, oh, I think I remember telling you or you saying that you're going to do this by this day, but my opinion versus your opinion, like nobody really knows. So once we have that kind of written down, we have our quarterly rocks written down, our measurable accountabilities, and so it's very clear. And that
Yep.
makes it much easier to keep each other accountable because, hey, you said you're going to do this by this time. Like, is it done yet or is it not?
Right. And what we find, whether it's with the rocks, and for those people who are listening, the rocks are goals, like goals that we've committed to, and who, what, when is just a action list, what we committed to. Generally, when we don't have those things, it ends up being a lot of finger pointing and miscommunication. I thought, didn't you? Wait a second. And what we find is that we can go back and then we can point to a commitment instead of another human, which it sounds like you're talking about. It goes way back. I was facilitating a fight in a family business yesterday, actually, like literally a fight where I had to raise my voice to get them both to stop. And
Wow.
thankfully it was virtually. But the point of it is their communication was going like this. And it was exactly what Jina was talking about. It was assumptions. You didn't, you should have. And I said, wait a second, let's just go pull up the document from the meeting. We go back and we look at the document and they're both like, oh, and then they're apologizing and everything's good. But because there was a truth we could look at versus an opinion, it's like enough structure, and the who, what, when's the same thing. And these are those little tiny details make a massive difference because we want to get along. We want to work well together, but those are great.
Yes.
Great example.
That was also something we had to discuss. Like, in the end, ultimately, our goal is the same thing, to grow the business. It doesn't matter who did it, how we did it, as long as we get there. And so it requires a lot of trust in each other to be able to let go of those finer details to ensure that we get to where we want to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not blaming. I think the old way too is a lot of blame. There's a lot of finger pointing and blaming each other, but now being more open-minded and curious and leading with questions instead, trying to understand from, again, to get into a less, not to get into like a defensive, or not to get the other person in a defensive position, that we're open to conversation, right? It's not, we're not trying to blame anyone.
Yeah, for my takeaway from all this is that entering with curiosity generally is the solution to so many things. And when we enter with judgment, you're just dropping a bomb on a situation no matter what. And it's for a lot of people, that's why I see a lot of people when they get to more senior roles, they fail because they enter with judgment and blame. No one wants to work with you, and all you're going to do is create drama. But it's very easy to say. We get upset or we get frustrated. There's a great thing in Jim Collins, and you've probably seen this through my team, but through the team. But there's a saying of how you decide whether you continue to develop a leader or it's time for them to leave your organization. Yeah. So develop or replace. And one of them is that, are they more of a window person versus mirror?
Yeah.
A window person, for example, when things go wrong, they point outside, it was this, it was that, it was them, it was this, blah, blah, blah. Whereas a mirror person looks at the mirror and goes, I think I could have done better. Mm-hmm. And they self-reflect. Mm-hmm. And at the root of it is, and it sounds like you've done this from what I'm hearing, is that the self-reflection creates accountability.
Yes.
And it hurts, but it creates growth. Like my ego would rather blame somebody else. It's because it's a relief. Mm-hmm. But when you reflect and you feel the pain of your oops that you made, you actually get better. Yeah. And then you're a better human that people can work better with. Mm-hmm. And that sounds a little bit like
as we reflect in the mirror, what I realized was, if I was reflecting on something that I said to Clemens and I felt bad about it, the harder part was to tell him, hey, I realized, I apologize, here's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. That's helped for sure, kind of open that door. And when she does that, it opens me up to be like, oh, you know what? I also, this is where I could have done better as well. And then we're not blaming each other. We're actually being progressive.
Yeah.
Right. But when the egos are kicked in, nobody wants to do that. And then you're like, well, if they're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And then you end up in a battle. And as soon as it is true. And it's juvenile and it's ego and we all can do it. Yeah. But yet when it's interesting, and Jina, you'll know this from the customer service side. I did a research study early, like in my 20s when I was in college. And I went to people because I worked a lot in restaurants. And I was curious what customers wanted when they got a meal that was bad. Like the meal wasn't cooked to their satisfaction. And I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of resources, so I assumed they wanted a free meal. And turns out that's not what people wanted. What people wanted was the waiter to authentically say, hey, my apologies. We made a mistake. How can we fix it for you? And essentially, people wanted to be seen and acknowledged and heard and understood. They didn't really care about the free thing. And the free thing is a nice gesture on top, but the root of it is no difference than this, is for the person to be, it's almost like for the person to take responsibility, reflect, and to try and solve it, which is just like the dynamic that you've talked about. It's a secret, to human nature generally. Like an angry customer generally wants to be heard.
Yeah, that's good. And we've definitely are still working on it. It's not easy. We haven't mastered it by any means. It's always a work in progress to get to that point.
It's a lifelong thing. Hey, I know these things and I've worked on these things for a long time and I still do it wrong sometimes. And as you wrote it down, I just had a personal situation, and I wrote down when you said I felt bad for what I think I might have to go and do that. I wrote it down to know for myself because I was having a disagreement with somebody about something, and I just realized I could have done a better job of cleaning it up, and I'm going to go and share that. I'm going to go clean up one of them.
Oh, nice.
It's life. We all do it. Like we're all trying to do our best, and we have moments when we do well, and then we have moments when we don't. And I have a belief on that for myself. I call it telling on myself. Like when I do mess something up or I do something I don't feel good, I'll often loop back after the fact and just sort of say, hey, don't think that went well. Or like I find a lot when I reflect after an intense meeting, sometimes I'll go clean stuff up. And same type of thing, because I try to do it right the first time. It doesn't. Awesome. That's a great example. So curiosity is at the core of approaching each other with curiosity versus judgment is a big deal. I got that. And Clemens, you mentioned like the who, what, when tool, which is just basically in meetings committing to the crystallizing what the actions are, which is such a basic thing, and it's part of scaling up. It's such a basic thing, but it prevents a lot of issues. And because it's clarity, and probably like you, and sometimes at the end of meetings, we'll go through and review them to double check that we actually, what's written down is what we meant, and we often have to fix it because it's not clear enough. So that's outside of that, and from whether it's the Jim Collins things that you've implemented, or the scaling up, or other things, is there another tool that you would say that you thought maybe was most impactful, or really had a big impact on you?
For me, working with Kristen on top grading was very eye-opening. Like having a job description, you think obviously we know what that we want them to do. They know what they need to do, but having it against KPIs and being able to articulate clearly, like this is your goal, that was really insightful. And letting them talk during like the 3-hour top grading interview, letting them talk and listening for patterns and gaps in what they're saying was another part of the interview process that I never actually realized how important that was, because I'm pretty sure I did most of the talking during my interviews.
You and most interviewers.
Yeah. And then like,
So go ahead.
and in trusting the process, like looking for that like a potential A player. There were so many opportunities where we had B players and we're like, what if maybe this is enough? But just like waiting for the right person, that was really hard, but it was worth it for sure.
Yeah, I like what you say. Like that framework, that is like, I wish I invented it. It is brilliant.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting? You just trust, you get more clarity up front on exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And then you go through that process and get them talking about what you want for it's, I don't know, do you find, and we haven't chatted about this before, but it becomes really clear by the time you get farther into the interview.
Yes. And the more people you interview, you realize, oh, that wasn't it. And like you get a sense of the role and you get a sense of the person that you need for the role. And so I think that was a very eye-opening process for us. And we've actually incorporated it now. We have someone in our company who's a top grader.
Yep. My belief is, because we see in our companies, like getting those hires right makes a massive difference. I know you've done a lot of work around that. And it's the methodology is not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's just a bit more discipline, and getting them to just give you more information so you can actually see who they are and if it matches.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, Clemens, go ahead.
Yeah, the struggle with like growing the business is and what we're used to with our dad too, just him being an entrepreneur, is doing everything fast. Like whenever you ask him like, when do you want it done by, he's always ASAP, ASAP, ASAP.
Yes,
sooner than ASAP, like yesterday. So it's always like go, go, go. And with the top grading process, because it is so long and thorough, that it's kind of fighting the natural instinct to be like, oh, my gut tells me they're good, like we should just go with them, like fighting against that, like Jina said, trusting the process and trusting Kristen too, because her helping us with that, to go through it like all the way to the end and see it through to the end. That it was hard, but it was definitely necessary, and yeah, a lot of positives out of that.
Yeah. For you, what difference, so having, we'll call it more rigor on your hiring process, to put it in simple terms, what difference is it making for your business now and for you as leaders?
I hope this doesn't sound bad in any way, but it like less work for me. I'm able to trust them, delegate more. Before I was leading some of those departments myself, and it's a lot. And not being a professional in HR or in marketing and not really knowing what I'm doing, and then trying to figure that out and learning at the same time, versus just trusting them, having an expert in the field and knowing that they come with this wealth of knowledge and experience that I think I'm doing a good job when I'm the dumbest person in the room. They're teaching me and they're educating me, and I'm getting smarter. Like I'm so grateful for them being in the room and being willing to like teach me and all that stuff. So yeah, I would say that's like a huge benefit there.
Do you find like I kind of say it's really easy to trust and hand things off to highly capable people?
Oh,
and people
absolutely.
say, oh, you need to trust your people and hand off more. Yes, but sometimes you just need better people.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
And when you
agree.
have people like that, it's way easier. Go ahead, Gina.
And the fact that they came in the company knowing what the expectations were, with the scorecard, we're able to ask very specific questions. And when they're onboarded, we're able to work along with and set the expectation up front. And so when it comes back to, going back and visiting, these were the expectations set and how you worked against them, the
Yep.
conversation becomes more progressive instead of, getting defensive or
Yeah.
tippy-toeing around each other.
Yep. We see that again, and it's interesting. Even there was one of the organizations we work with, they did the whole process, but they didn't check the references. And the person was horrible at their job.
Oh,
Because
yes.
the person slipped through, like the interview process didn't catch it all. So we're in the meeting, and the CEO is, as we're going through it and reviewing all the key leaders, and the CEO is like, he was so angry, he stepped out of the meeting, grabbed the person's resume, called the reference. The reference was there, called the CEO of the company that the person worked for because they were working at an executive level, talked to the CEO, got feedback. And what the CEO said was exactly the issues that they were having. And so now in that organization, like if you don't check the references, like you're putting your life at risk. I'm exaggerating, but
I
it's
took
just,
that to the next level. Now I'm like reference checking like third-party contractors and, just in case, because they might seem good, but you never know how
yep.
they work out.
Yeah. And if it's a key role, like look at, if it's a part-time cashier in your store, you might not do 14 third-party reference checks, right? But if it's a key person, it's different. And the last thing I'll share is we've seen over the years, generally, almost always, when you'd follow the process pretty thoroughly, all the flags, 90% of the flags show up. And when there's an issue, generally you at least you got to see it. Now you may have decided to try and take a chance. That's different. But that process flushes out most, like you know what you're getting. There's not a lot of surprises. Awesome. Yeah, I'm just such a advocate of that, because great people make our life easy. It's just and it's a little bit more work up front. Awesome. So just in terms of and getting a coach and advisor, and you first connected with Tim, like what made you decide to do this? Because like obviously we're in the industry of helping people, and we see how we can help people when they're needing to make some things happen, and a lot of people aren't comfortable asking for help. So what is it that made you decide to get someone from the outside to assist?
It was tough. Definitely never working with someone kind of outside of our own business, and always being able to figure things out. But to a certain point, when we got to a certain, we're kind of like, I would say, mid-sized corporation, and we're trying to grow as well, and realizing that there are a lot of things that we don't know. We had a lot of questions, but not enough answers, and we're still kind of in this trial and error phase. So there was that, and then there was, at the time, I started reading, and I started reading a lot. And one of the books was Scaling Up. I read Traction as well. A lot of other books, Keith Ferrazzi's book as well, and we kind of talked to
Yep.
his team, and realizing, oh, this is what it looks like to run a well-run like organization. These are some of the things that other people are doing that we're not. And reading that, our natural kind of instinct was, oh, I read Scaling Up. Let me try to implement it in our company. I could do that. That was a typical trial and error approach. And
Yep.
maybe it'll take us 3 to 5 years to even get 10, 15% of it implemented. Or yeah, I don't know what it was at the time through all the exposure to the books maybe, but I thought, if they have coaches, if we hire a coach, they can really help us accelerate our learning and growth. They'll bring this external knowledge and expertise, and hopefully provide us with some answers to all these strategic questions that we're having and issues we're having that we just didn't know how to resolve. And so, yeah, in that process, did a bunch of interviews on different coaches from different areas. And when we met Tim, we were like, instantly there was chemistry, and we're like, he's the one. Yep, let's do this.
Awesome. Yeah, and you said look at, there's lots of different frameworks, and obviously we believe in scaling up, and I put a lot of work into that project in that book, and I believe, obviously we believe in a lot, but the chemistry is a big piece. Like there's lots of ways you can do it, but when you get an advisor and you have the right chemistry, away you go. right? And it's, because you need to enjoy working with them, and there needs to be that compatibility. That's awesome. And if you were to like break down like the number one impact, and and there's, you've worked with other members of our team, but Tim is kind of the lead on things. What would you say is the biggest impact it's had on you, if you were to summarize it in one sentence or two sentences for each of you?
Keeping myself and my team accountable.
Hmm.
It was hard to even accept the idea or to think that I wasn't, but to be able to now communicate that was next level.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Clemens, for you?
For me, I would say um, I want to say personal development. So as a person and as a leader, I think there's a lot of value that we got from Tim, like that external third party perspective.
Mhm.
And really before it was just like me in my own head by myself.
Yeah.
And now having someone else come and tell me, hey, this is what great looks like. And realizing, these are the possibilities and potentials. And I was limiting my potential by being just like within my own kind of comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, external expertise, just really opening up my mind and realizing what is possible and what good looks like, and aiming for that.
Love it. So with that in mind, potential and what's possible, what does the future look like? So what's if we look out 5 or 10 years, what do you see happening in the world of Cloré?
Well, go, Jina.
Oh, I was gonna say it's not limited to Cloré anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we can think beyond Cloré, but also for Cloré, now that we have a very clear purpose with our strategies and our visions are all aligned, we can grow and scale much faster than we've ever done before. And outside of Cloré, I mean, it's unlimited now what we can do.
So if I'm reading between the lines, I mean, you want to continue to grow Cloré, or you can continue
For
to add
sure.
stores and grow that for sure. But
Yes.
are you thinking about other enterprises as well? Is that what you don't need to
Yeah.
disclose, but is that you're open up to doing some additional things? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, that's what Tim brought out of Young. Like in the meeting, for the first time, we heard Young say, I want other components to like our family business. And maybe you can work here. Maybe you could do this. Like he just like threw it out, and we were like, what? There's stuff outside of Cloré, And so, that expanded what we like our vision of what our future could look like.
Right. That's awesome. So Cloré is going to continue to grow. You've got the platform there, and it sounds like there might be something else that gets added into it as you go forward. Isn't it exciting?
It is.
Like, and what gives you the confidence to do that? Like, what gives you the belief that you can go and do all these things?
The practice that we have now with scaling up and top grading, that foundation is, easily replicatable as long as we have discipline to implement them.
Yep. That's the way, like we call it, it's basically management systems.
Yes.
Right. And with those management systems, you can as long as you do something that creates real value for a customer, and you can do it at a healthy margin, you can take the management system of the vision, the strategy and goals, building a stronger team, getting better clarity in financial reporting. You put that together, you can apply it to anything. It's the system, and then you just go figure out what the next exciting opportunity is. That's awesome. Yeah, that's good. No, again, it's great having this conversation, because that's what I feel like. Once you figure this out, it's like, okay, now what do we want to do? That's why we have, we have some private equity firms that take this model, these frameworks, and they just apply it to their businesses. And when they want to apply a new business, they just install the management system, and then they get a much better chance of success. There's still risk, but you get a way better chance of success. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So final question, and thank you for your time. It's been a super inspiring to hear your story, and I'm also looking forward to what comes next. What advice would you give to other leaders, now that you're at this next level of your journey, which will continue, but other leaders that are earlier and maybe kind of where you were, in the past? What advice would you give to other leaders or the younger version of yourselves today?
I'd say, um, yeah, they say it's lonely at the top, but you don't have to be alone. So,
Hmm.
one, having a partner like a sibling, if you do have someone that you can kind of lean on. And Gina and I are maybe coincidentally very opposite in terms of our personality styles. So there's benefit in that. And
Yeah.
also not being afraid to go out and, maybe get a coach, maybe join a peer group as well. I know there's,
Hmm.
YPO, Vistage, EO, things like that, where you can really source a lot of experience and knowledge and support from people that are also in a similar situation. Yeah.
Oh,
I agree.
awesome. Gina?
I agree with all of that, and also exposing yourself. Like, don't be afraid to go out. I was kind of like, oh, I don't really like networking events. It feels awkward, but that awkwardness, there's so much opportunity there. And the people that you meet and the people that you surround yourself with really change the direction of, where you could go.
Yes. Yes, and it's a great thing to close on. It's the people that you meet, those relationships you build where you can
Yes,
learn from each other and help each other. And as you build a bigger enterprise, it's different people that you would ideally connect with because there's
exactly.
different challenges and different things. That's awesome. All right. Well, congratulations to both of you in terms of where you've got it. Obviously to your father and your uncles who instigated all of this and where you've taken it to. And yeah, I appreciate you taking your time to share your story and your journey. And my main takeaway from this is approaching each other with curiosity. And
Yes.
that's the theme of this. And it also applies to the top grading piece of approaching those people with a lot of curiosity. So that's
Yeah.
um yeah, it's not thinking, being curious, seeking to understand.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you both very, very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We'll put links in the bottom if you want to read the full case study about Jina and Clemens and Cloré, and also a link to their business if you want to go see it or you want to go and buy. If you're a potential customer, please check it out. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much,
It was a
Kevin.
pleasure.
Take care.
See you both. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.